She cleaned his house for 12 years. Then one day, he opened her locker. He wasn't supposed to open that locker. It was small, rusted around the hinges, pushed into the back corner of the narrow staff hallway where the cleaning supplies lived and nobody else ever went. The kind of locker you stop seeing after a while because it has always been there and has never given you a reason to look at it. But the smell. Something inside had gone bad. Something that had been sitting untouched long enough for the warmth of the hallway to do what warmth does to forgotten things. Edward Hale noticed it on a Tuesday morning, passing through to the garage, and he stopped and looked at the locker the way a man looks at a problem he wants to solve quickly and move past. He was a man who solved problems quickly and moved past them. That was how he had built everything he had. He found the property manager. He told her to force the lock. She did. And what Edward Hale found inside that rusted metal locker on a Tuesday morning stopped him in the narrow hallway of his own house and brought a man who had never broken in front of anyone to his knees. Not metaphorically. He literally could not stand. This is that story. And before you hear what was in the locker, you need to understand what it took to get there. Because the contents of a locker only mean something when you understand the life that filled it. Stay with us. Edward Hale. Edward Hale was 51 years old and had built his company from a single office with 2 employees into an enterprise that employed thousands of people across 4 countries. He had done this through a combination of intelligence, a relentless work, and a philosophy he had held since his 20s that could be summarized in a single word: efficiency. He was not cruel. He would have been offended if anyone had called him cruel. He paid competitive salaries. He provided good benefits. He ran a clean operation. He did not ask more from his people than the job required, and he did not pretend to care about things he did not care about, which he considered a form of honesty. What he did not do was notice people, not the individuals, not the specific human beings behind the functions they performed for him. He noticed performance. He noticed results. He noticed when something was done well and when something was done badly. But the person doing it, their name, their history, the life they carried with them through his doors every morning, that was not information he sought and not information he stored. People who worked for Edward Hale knew this about him. They did not resent it, exactly. They had simply adjusted their expectations downward until the expectation matched the reality, which is what people do when the alternative is continuous disappointment. He lived alone in a large house on the north side of the city. He had been married once, briefly, in his 30s, and had found that the marriage required more of his interior attention than he was able to give it. His ex-wife had moved away and remarried someone she described as present, which Edward understood was the antonym of what she had found in him. He did not argue with this assessment. The house required cleaning. He engaged a service. The service sent people. The people came and went over the years. He noticed when the cleaning was not done well. He did not notice the people who did it, except that one person had been coming for 12 years, and he had never, not once, learned her name. Martha. Her name was Martha Calloway. She was 63 years old, although she looked older in the way that women look older when their lives have been physically demanding and financially tight for a long time. She had deep lines around her eyes and hands that were dry and strong from decades of work, and she moved through spaces with the particular quiet efficiency of someone who has learned to take up as little room as possible. She had been cleaning houses for most of her adult life, not because it was what she had planned. She had planned, when she was young, to study nursing. She had the aptitude for it and the temperament. She had enrolled twice and had to leave twice, each time, because the money ran out before the qualification was completed. The third time she tried to go back, her son Daniel was 6 years old, and she was raising him alone, and there was no version of the arithmetic that worked. So she cleaned houses. She was very good at it. Not just the cleaning itself, though she was thorough and methodical. She was good at the invisible things, the small acts of care that went beyond what the job required. She noticed when the plant in Edward Hale's kitchen was drooping and gave it water. She noticed when the medicine cabinet ran low on things a person living alone needed, and left a note on the counter with the items listed in her neat, small handwriting. She noticed when he had been working late, and she covered his dinner plate when he left food out, so it would still be good when he got to it. He never mentioned any of these things. She never expected him to. She came every Tuesday and Thursday, for 4 hours each visit, for 12 years. She arrived at 8, she left at noon, and if they passed in a corridor, he would nod, and she would nod, and that was the extent of their interaction across 12 years. She knew a great deal about him. He knew nothing about her. The small things. If you had been able to follow Martha through Edward Hale's house on any given Tuesday, you would have seen the job she did, and you would have seen the job she did beyond the job. You would have seen her straighten the photograph on the hallway wall that listed to the left every single week without fail, so reliably that she had stopped wondering why the nail was set wrong and simply accepted that straightening it was now part of the route. You would have seen her replace the book he had been reading and left face down on the armchair arm, not closing it, just sliding a bookmark in before she set it upright, because face down broke the spines of books, and he had a lot of books, and they were good ones. You would have seen her pick up the broken glass in the kitchen in October of the 3rd year, when he had knocked a tumbler off the counter and swept most of the pieces up himself, but had missed the small shards near the baseboard. She found them with bare hands, slowly, feeling for the edges she could not see, because the new house cleaner they were sending on Fridays was a young woman who wore flip-flops in the kitchen. She picked up every piece. She did not mention it. She never used his things, not once in 12 years. She kept her own tea in the small locker in the staff hallway. She made it with her own supplies, drank it in her own time, washed and dried the cup, and put it back. As though she was a guest in a house that had never offered to host her. Because she was. Daniel Calloway was 34 years old and had his mother's eyes and his mother's quality of quiet precision. He had grown up understanding that money was something you managed carefully because there was never quite enough of it, and he had absorbed this lesson so thoroughly that by the time he was in his 20s, he was one of the most methodical and reliable employees any company had ever hired. He had worked his way through community college while holding 2 jobs and had graduated with a business administration degree and a work ethic that impressed everyone who encountered it. He had applied, at 26, for a junior analyst position at Hale Enterprises because the company had a good reputation for promoting from within, and Daniel was the kind of person who thought in terms of where a door might lead. He got the position. He was good at it. His supervisor noted in his first 6-month review that he was one of the most thorough and self-directed junior analysts she had worked with. He was quiet, the way his mother was quiet, not shy, just considered. He thought before he spoke, and when he spoke, it was worth listening to. He had been at Hale Enterprises for 8 months when the headaches started. He ignored them for 3 weeks because he was 26 years old and healthy, and the headaches seemed like the kind of thing that went away. They did not go away. They got worse. He went to a clinic, and the clinic referred him for imaging, and the imaging returned a result that the doctor delivered in the specific, careful language doctors use when the result is one they have had to learn to deliver carefully. A mass. Left temporal region. Requiring immediate attention and a course of treatment that would be extended and intensive, and that the doctor outlined in terms of timelines and probabilities that Daniel sat with in the clinic parking lot for 45 minutes before he called his mother. He called his mother because that was who you called. Martha sat down when he told her. She was in the staff hallway of Edward Hale's house, between her Tuesday shift and her afternoon job, and she sat on the floor with her back against the lockers because her legs would not support her for a moment, and she breathed. And then she said, "We will figure this out." She said it the way she said everything that needed to be said, steadily, without performance, because the saying of it steadily was itself a form of promise. The treatment Daniel required was not covered in full by his insurance, which was the basic plan available to junior employees at his level. The gap between what the insurance covered and what the treatment cost was significant. Martha looked at the number, and she did not let herself feel the full weight of it in one moment, because feeling the full weight of it would have made clear thinking impossible, and she needed to think clearly. She took a third job. She had been working too, the service that placed her in houses like Edward Hale's, and an evening shift 3 days a week at a commercial cleaning company downtown. She added a Saturday morning job at a hotel near the airport. She was 60 years old. She worked 7 days a week. She did not tell Daniel how many jobs she was working. She told him she had savings set aside, which was partially true in the sense that she was setting aside everything she earned above her basic expenses and calling it savings from the moment she earned it. The math was creative. The love behind it was not. Daniel had to leave Hale Enterprises. The treatment schedule made full-time work impossible. He left quietly, filed the necessary paperwork, thanked his supervisor, cleaned out his desk. His supervisor asked if he was all right, and he said he had a health situation to address, and she said she was sorry, and that was the end of it. Somewhere on a floor above, in an office with a view of the city, Edward Hale received a staffing update noting a junior analyst departure. He initialed it. He moved to the next item. He did not know the junior analyst's name. He did not know his face. He certainly did not know that the quiet, methodical young man who had worked for his company for 8 months and disappeared without explanation was the son of the woman who cleaned his house every Tuesday and Thursday and had been doing so for 9 years at that point. Martha knew he did not know. She thought about telling him. She thought about it across many Tuesdays and Thursdays, passing his study door. You're hearing his voice on calls about acquisitions and capital and strategies that involved sums of money that would have solved her problem entirely and meant nothing to him. She thought about knocking on his study door and saying, "Mr. Hale, I work for you. I have worked for you for 9 years. My son worked for your company. He is very ill. I am asking for help." She thought about this, and then she thought about the way he nodded when they passed in the corridor. The nod that covered the entire distance between them and contained nothing of her. No name, no face, no recognition beyond the functional category of staff present. She did not knock. She kept cleaning. She kept working 3 jobs. She kept telling Daniel everything would be all right. In the 10th year of working in Edward Hale's house, Martha sat at her small kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night after a double shift, with Daniel's latest treatment schedule in front of her and the month's finances on a notepad beside it, and she wrote a letter. She addressed it to Edward Hale. She wrote it clearly, without surplus. She told him who she was, that she had been cleaning his house for 10 years, that she was not sure he knew this, but wanted him to know it before she asked what she was going to ask. She told him about Daniel, about the diagnosis, about the treatment, about the 8 months he had worked for Hale Enterprises as a junior analyst before he had to leave. She told him what the treatment cost and what she had been doing to cover it. She did not phrase this as an accusation. She phrased it as information because she was not angry with him. A disappointment requires expectation, and she had stopped expecting things from Edward Hale a long time ago. She wrote near the end, "I have wanted to ask you for help just once. I have been in your house for 10 years, and I know that what I am asking would not be a large problem for you. It would be nothing to you. But I also know that I am not a real person to you. I am a function your house requires, and I cannot ask for help from someone who has never once looked at me long enough to see me." She wrote, "So I will keep working instead. That is what I know how to do. I am not writing this to give it to you. I am writing it because sometimes you have to say a thing to survive it, even if no one hears you say it." She folded the letter. She put it in an unsealed envelope with his name on the front. She put it in her locker, at the back, and under her spare uniform and her lunch container. She went to bed. She never gave it to him. She never meant to. 12 years after Martha Calloway first walked through the service entrance of Edward Hale's house, she came on a Tuesday morning in March and cleaned it for the last time. She did not know it was the last time. Or perhaps she did. The way you sometimes know things before you allow yourself to know them. She straightened the photograph in the hallway. She found a bookmark for his book. She watered the kitchen plant. She worked her way through the house in the order she had always worked through it. Daniel had been in the hospital for 11 days. The most recent scan had returned results covered in careful language. And the specific words that came through the carefulness were words like palliative and comfort. And we want him to be comfortable. She had come to work on Tuesday morning because she needed the hours. Because the bills did not pause for hospital rooms. She cleaned the house. She left at noon. She did not come back on Thursday. She did not come back the following Tuesday. She did not come back. Edward Hale noticed the absence the way he noticed most absences, as a functional disruption requiring a practical solution. The house was not clean. He called the service. The service said their regular cleaner had not reported in, and they were unable to reach her, and they apologized for the disruption and would send a replacement as soon as possible. He said fine. They sent a replacement. He was not worried. It did not occur to him to be worried. People who worked for services disappeared sometimes. It was not his concern. He noticed, vaguely, that the replacement was not as thorough. The plant was not watered. His book was left face down. These things mildly irritated him. He did not connect the irritation to the absence of a specific person, because he had never identified the specific person as the source of these small, careful attentions. He had simply absorbed them the way you absorb background comfort, as something present that you would not notice until it stopped. It had stopped. He noticed only that things were slightly less right. He did not know what had changed. He did not ask. It was 3.5 weeks after Martha's last shift. Edward Hale was passing through the staff hallway on a Tuesday morning, and the smell stopped him. It was the lunch container. She had left it in the locker on the last day, forgotten in the rush to leave, or left behind because she already knew something was ending, and it had been sitting in the closed metal locker in the warm hallway for 3.5 weeks. He looked at the locker. He looked at the small nameplate slot, which was empty. He found the property manager and told her to force the lock. She worked the hinges. The lock gave. The door swung open. Edward Hale stood in the narrow hallway of his own house and looked at what 12 years of a woman's working life had left behind. He set aside the food container. Below it, a spare uniform, neatly folded. A small hand lotion, nearly empty. Pain relief tablets. A pair of rubber gloves, the kind you replace regularly when you work with cleaning products, these ones worn through at the fingertips. On the bottom shelf, a canvas bag. Inside the canvas bag, a cardigan. Old, soft, washed so many times the colour had faded to something that might once have been blue. And beneath the cardigan, held together with a rubber band, a collection of cards. He sat down on the floor of the hallway. There was nowhere to sit, and the floor was the closest surface. And he looked at them. Birthday cards, some made by hand in the unsteady art of a young child, crayon and marker on folded paper, with words spelled phonetically and hearts drawn slightly lopsided. Some store-bought, signed in a neat small hand. Happy birthday, Mom. Love you always. You are the strongest person I know. She had kept them in her work locker. Not just at home. Here, in the place she spent a significant portion of her waking hours. Because her son was also here with her, in the way that the people we love are with us everywhere we carry them. He set the cards down carefully. He reached back into the canvas bag. He found a box, a shoebox, reinforced at the corners with tape where the cardboard had begun to separate. Inside, organized with the same methodical care she brought to everything, were 3 categories of document. Medical bills, a thick sheaf of them, paper-clipped by year. He did not read the amounts immediately. He looked at the dates first. They spanned 8 years. And then at the diagnostic terms at the top of each form, which required no medical training to understand, because the words were large and repeated and unmistakable. He set the bills aside. He picked up the second category: letters, printed emails, correspondence between Martha and a hospital patient coordinator, between Martha and an insurance company, between Martha and a billing department. The language of these letters was the language of a system talking to a person and the person talking back, patiently and precisely and in slightly different forms, trying to find the gap through which some relief might come. She had written to the hospital's financial assistance office 4 times across 3 years. Each response was filed, paper-clipped to her original request. The responses were regretful and formulaic and insufficient. He set the letters down. He picked up the photographs. They were at the bottom of the box, loose, a small collection. A boy at various ages, young, gap-toothed and grinning, in front of a Christmas tree. Older, in a graduation gown, with Martha beside him, both of them smiling with the specific quality of people who have earned something together. Then an adult, at a desk, in what looked like an office. A junior employee's desk, neat and well organized, in a background that Edward Hale looked at for a long moment. He knew that office. He knew the configuration of those desks, those carpet tiles, the way the light came through those windows. He had walked past those desks hundreds of times. That was the 4th floor of Hale Enterprises. He turned the photograph over. On the back, in the small, neat handwriting he recognized even without being able to name its source. Daniel, 1st week, March. He sat with the photograph. Then he reached into the box and found the last thing. An envelope. Unsealed. His name written on the front. Not his title, not the formal address. Just Edward Hale. He took out the letter. He read it. He read it the way you read something when you already know it is going to cost you something, and you keep reading anyway, because stopping would be its own kind of cowardice. She had been in his house for 10 years when she wrote it. She had been in his house for 10 years, and she had known, across all of those years, exactly who she was to him. Not a person, a function, staff. She had written, "I wanted to ask you for help just once. I have been in your house for 10 years, and I know this will surprise you, because I don't think you know I've been here that long, or that I am anyone specific rather than simply the person who cleans your house. I don't say this with anger. I say it because it is true, and because the truth of it is why I am writing this letter instead of knocking on your door." She had written, "My son Daniel worked for your company. He was a junior analyst on the 4th floor for 8 months, and he was good at the work. He left because he got sick. He has been sick for 4 years now, and I have been working to cover what his treatment costs. There are months when managing it feels like holding water in cupped hands and trying not to lose too much. She had written, "You could fix this problem without noticing you had done it. I know that. I have watched you solve problems of this scale before lunch, but you would have to see me first. And I have been in this house for 10 years, and you have not yet managed that." She had written, "So I will keep working instead." And at the very bottom, in slightly different ink, added later, "You are not a bad man, Mr. Hale. I want you to know I don't think that. I think you are a man who built himself so completely around what he could achieve that he forgot to look at what was already there. I am sorry for both of us that it took this long for either of us to say so." The letter was signed, Martha Calloway. 12 years in your employ. The hospital receipt. He almost missed it. It had slipped to the bottom of the envelope, a single folded paper. When he opened it, he understood immediately what it was. The specific kind of hospital receipt issued when a patient's record is closed. And he looked at the date in the top right corner. 3 months before this Tuesday morning. He looked at the name on the receipt. Daniel Calloway, 34 years old. Her son had died 3 months ago, before Martha's last Tuesday. She had kept coming to work. She had kept cleaning his house. She had come 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday and cleaned it for the last time, and she had watered his plant and straightened his photograph and found a bookmark for his book. She had done all of those things 3 weeks after burying her son. She had come because she needed the hours, because she was 63 years old and alone, and the bills did not stop. And he had noticed only that the plant was not being watered. Edward Hale did not break quietly. He had spent 51 years constructing a self that did not break at all. And when it finally broke, it did not observe any of the dignified constraints he had maintained across those decades. He sat on the floor of the narrow staff hallway with the birthday cards around him and the letter in his hands, and he wept in the specific, ungoverned way of a man who has not wept in a very long time, and whose body has been storing it up. The property manager backed away quietly and went to the other end of the house and stayed there. He sat on that floor for a long time. He sat there with the full weight of what the box contained, which was not just documents and photographs and a letter never sent. It was the weight of 12 years of small attentions he had absorbed without acknowledgement. The weight of a son who had worked for him for 8 months and been good at it and disappeared without notice, and he had never asked why. The weight of a woman who had been present in his life for 12 years. 12 years. And he had reduced her to a nod in a corridor. He thought about all the Tuesdays, all the Thursdays, the uncountable number of times they had passed in a hallway, or he had been in his study while she moved through his house with that quiet competence, and he had not looked, had not asked, had not wondered. He thought about the plant she watered, and the book she bookmarked, and the broken glass she had picked up with bare hands so someone younger would not be hurt. He had never connected those things to a person. He had received them the way you receive heat from a radiator, without considering the source. He thought about the letter. "I have been in your house for 10 years, and you have not yet managed to see me." She had written it 10 years in, and then kept coming for 2 more years and never given it to him. Because she had already known, by the time she wrote it, that giving it would not produce the seeing, that you cannot hand someone the ability to look. She had been dying, not physically, but the specific quiet death of a person who carries something unseen for too long, for 12 years. And he had been 15 feet away, in a study, solving problems that dwarfed hers entirely. And he had never once stopped to ask what was happening in the rest of his house. It took him 2 days to locate her. The service had a last known address. He drove there himself. He stood outside an apartment building in the south of the city and rang the bell for apartment 4C. She answered the intercom on the third ring. When she heard his name, she was silent for a moment. Then she said, "How did you find me?" "The service had your address," he said. "I should have had it myself. I should have known it years ago." Silence. "What do you want, Mr. Hale?" He stood on the pavement outside her building and said, without any of the efficiency that characterized every professional exchange he had ever conducted, "I read the letter. I am deeply, genuinely sorry. And I know that saying so is insufficient. I am here because I needed to say it in person. To you specifically. Because you are a person and I should have known that a long time ago." The intercom was quiet for a long time. Then the door buzzed open. Martha Calloway's apartment was small and very clean, and contained, on the windowsill, a plant that was clearly thriving under attentive care. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at him with the steady eyes of a woman who had spent a long time reading rooms and the people in them. He sat in the chair she offered. He apologized more than once, not to perform it, but because once did not feel sufficient to the scale of what it covered. She listened to each iteration and received it the way she received everything, completely, without performing a reaction for his benefit. He asked her to tell him about Daniel. She told him. About the gap-toothed boy in front of the Christmas tree and the graduation and the 8 months on the 4th floor and the diagnosis and the 8 years that followed. She told him without self-pity, because self-pity was not something she had ever been able to afford. He listened, not for a problem to solve, because she was a person and she was speaking, and the listening was the minimum of what was owed. When she finished, he said, "I want to do something. I know it is too late for what mattered most, but I want to do something real." Martha looked at him. "Why?" she said, not hostilely, as a genuine question from a woman who had spent her life in a world that operated on transactions and wanted to understand which kind this was. "Because your son worked for me," he said, "and I did not know him. He was, by everything you have told me, by what his supervisor noted, by the work I can look back at now that I have a name to attach to it. He was exactly the kind of person I should have known. And because you were in my house for 12 years, and you cared for it better than I did, and I never gave you the dignity of knowing your name." He met her eyes. "I want to do something because it is right, not because it fixes anything, because it is the right thing, and I have not been doing the right things." Martha was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Daniel would have liked you to know his name. He was proud of that job. He used to tell me about it, the projects he was working on, the things he was learning." She looked at the window. "He was proud." "I know his name now," Edward Hale said. "Daniel Calloway, junior analyst, 4th floor, thorough and self-directed." His supervisor's exact words. Martha was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good. He deserves to be known." He went to the grave the following Saturday. He went alone, early in the morning, and he stood at the headstone and looked at the name and the dates and the brief inscription Martha had chosen. He was here. He was good. He went back the Saturday after that. He went every week for 6 months, and then continued to go, less regularly, but never stopping. Because there are commitments you make to the dead that are not made for anyone's benefit but your own reckoning. On the second visit, he brought a small plant, something that would live rather than something that would die. He left it at the base of the stone. He did not know if this was the done thing. He did it because it felt more honest than flowers. He did not transform overnight into a different man. What happened was slower and less comfortable. The sustained work of a person who has identified a significant failure in himself and has decided to address it as precisely and thoroughly as he addressed every other problem he considered worth solving. He learned the names of everyone who worked in his house. He went back through the service's records and learned the names of the people who had worked there across the years. He could not undo the 12 years of not knowing Martha's name, but he could ensure that no one who worked in his house from this point forward was a nod in a corridor. He expanded the financial assistance program at his company. He had had one, a modest fund for employees facing medical hardship. But it had been underfunded and underpublicized, and the application process was complicated enough to deter the people most likely to need it. He simplified the process. He tripled the fund. He had his HR director personally inform every employee of its existence in direct communication, not buried in a handbook nobody read. He funded a medical research wing. When the hospital administration asked what name he wanted on the dedication plaque, he gave them a name that none of the major donors in attendance that day recognized: Daniel Calloway. A young man who had been good at his work and proud of it, who deserved more from the world than the world gave him, and whose mother had worked 12 years in the house of the man who could have helped them, close enough to ask, unable to ask. And he made one other change that he did not announce and that nobody wrote about. The locker in the staff hallway, the small rusted one in the back corner, he had repaired. New hinges, new lock. He put a nameplate on the slot. The nameplate read, M. Calloway. He told the service that the locker was not available for any other employee. He did not put anything inside it. He simply left it there, in the hallway, where she had kept the birthday cards and the worn cardigan and the letter she had written in order to survive the weight of it. It was a reminder. A physical, permanent reminder that the people in his house, the people who cared for his things, who noticed his plant and bookmarked his books and picked up his broken glass with bare hands, were people. Were specific human beings with suns and heartbreaks and midnight letters and hands worn through at the fingertips. He needed the reminder to be physical. He had spent too many years trusting himself to remember things that were not written down. Martha Calloway went back to work. She had to. 63 was not the age at which a woman with her resources stopped working, and she did not want to stop. Work was what she knew. Work was how she moved through the world. She went to a different service in a different part of the city, and she took on a caseload that kept her busy 4 days a week and left 3 for the other things. The other things were these. She visited Daniel's grave on Sundays. She tended a small garden plot behind her apartment building that she had been coaxing into producing roses for several years and was beginning to succeed. She went, on Wednesday evenings, to a community centre 2 streets from her building where she helped with a literacy program for adults. Sitting at a table in a quiet room and being patient and precise in the way that had always been her nature, with people who had not had the chance she had to learn to read, giving them the thing the librarian had once given her without charge. She was not happy in the way that stories sometimes resolve into happiness. She missed Daniel with the specific, permanent quality of a mother missing a child, which does not fade, but which you learn to carry with the same methodical care you bring to everything else. She received, some months after the conversation in her apartment, a letter from Hale Enterprises informing her of a fund established in her son's name to support medical treatment costs for employees experiencing financial hardship. The letter included a handwritten note. He deserved to be known. He is known now. She sat with the letter for a long time. Then she folded it and put it somewhere she would not lose it. She kept it the way she kept everything she valued. Quietly, in a place she knew, available whenever she needed to return to it. Some people do not ask for help, not because they are proud exactly, though pride is part of it. Not because they do not need it, though they will tell you they do not. They do not ask because the world has spent a long time teaching them a specific lesson. And the lesson is this: the people who could help you are not looking at you. They are looking through you, or past you, or at the version of you that is useful to them, the version that is a function and not a person. Martha Calloway spent 12 years in a man's house, and she was never a function. She was a woman who had buried a husband and given up her education, and had instead built a life out of the materials available to her. Quietly, thoroughly, with a care for the world around her that the world did not return. She watered his plant. She saved the bookmark. She picked up the broken glass. Not because she expected anything, not as a strategy, because that was who she was. And the man who finally saw her too late to give her the thing she needed most. That is the truth of this story, and we will not soften it. The thing she needed most was not available by the time he sat on the floor of his own hallway with birthday cards around him and a letter in his hands. What was available was this: to see her now, to know Daniel's name now, to do the right things now, not because they fixed what was broken, but because they were right and he was capable of them, and the only direction available was forward. That is what he did. It was not enough. It was what was left. There is a locker in a staff hallway with a nameplate that will outlast the man who put it there. There are roses beginning, finally, to come in properly in a small apartment garden. A medical wing in a city hospital carries a name that most people in that city do not recognize. A literacy program meets on Wednesday evenings in a community center, 2 streets from an apartment building, and the woman who runs the reading sessions has patient hands and careful eyes and a quality of stillness that makes the people across the table from her feel, for the first time in some of their lives, that someone is genuinely present with them. She is present with them. She always was. If this story stayed with you, if the birthday cards on the floor hit you somewhere real, if Martha's letter made something tighten in your chest, if you found yourself thinking about the people in your life who do their quiet, careful work without recognition, then you already know why we tell these stories. Look at the people around you, not through them, not past them, at them. Learn their names. It costs nothing. It is everything. Subscribe. Come back. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. We will be here. The stories do not run out. The people in them never stop deserving to be seen.